Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, Reality Check. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, share, all the other things that you're supposed to do. Make my channel strong. The network I'm on clearly doesn't like me or wants to promote me. So I have to rely on you to promote this thing. And I think I'm bringing on an eclectic group of guests. We're talking about things that are really interesting, and any support I can get from you will be highly appreciated. I'm not monetized. I don't put ads on. I don't need the money. I want the eyes. That's what I want. So everybody join. This is part two of a really interesting conversation we had starting last week with Andrew Collins, the great British writer, researcher who's written just countless books. Probably the most prolific researcher around today. I put him up there with people like Graham Hancock, serious researchers who go and do their homework and go out to the field and actually see what's going on. And so I really appreciate you coming on, Andrew. Thank you.
That's my pleasure to be back again.
We're talking about the invisible universe, and I want to continue that because it's my favorite subject, I think, right now. And it's sort of like the grand unified theory of the paranormal. It explains ghosts, it explains strange mass hallucinations like Fatima, which I think was a plasma experience now that I think about it. It also explains a lot of the UFOs and abductions. And what people don't realize is that your brain is plasma. And when I want to bring this up right away because it's seriously important. The people who have had these experiences often report like an odd fog or a mist, and they see it coming, and then it comes around them and it's electrical, and they can hear charges and buzzing sounds. And and I've seen this fog too, and it does look like fog. It's gray, and it has a cloudy mist to it, and it has the buzzing sound, but it's not a cloud. It's a plasma field. And I'm beginning to think that the word mysticism and mystic, whose root is mist, is based on this idea that if you get involved with one of these plasma clouds, you're going to have some kind of odd, strange, mystical experience. And I've had them, so I know what I'm talking about. And in your book, I believe a number of times you talk about people who have seen these plasma clouds, these mists, and have had experiences. What do you think about that idea?
Well, let's take a trip back in time. I came into this, as I said last week, as a UFO investigator, and I very quickly realised that the phenomena that people were encountering was not necessarily physical. And what I mean by that is that it was nebulous. It was only temporarily present within our world, within our reality, and then it would disappear from where it came. There was also a psychic link between human consciousness, in other words, our minds, and the phenomena. The phenomena seemed to be interested in us, and somehow we could attract it. I mean, certain types of people would seem to attract it more. But anyway, I investigated literally hundreds of cases. I mean, huge, great files, which are there on record with the British UFO Research Association, the UFO International Network, or whatever it was called, UFOIN. And, you know, eventually I became a troubleshooter, you know, traveling around the country, investigating the high strangeness cases that would crop up. And one that actually occurred on my doorstep that I was called in to investigate involved a whole family of 5 people. This was 2 adults and 3 young children. And they were driving along a road at night. They were on a short journey that only should have taken them 20 minutes. And they were going along a country lane. And suddenly they saw this object up above. Now, it was described as like an oval-shaped blue, what we'd now describe as a plasma-like object. And they identified it as a UFO. Only one of the children was awake, and he got quite excited in the back of the car. And it went out of sight, and they thought that the whole thing was over. They then went to turn a bend, and the car headlights failed. The engine failed. The radio started smoking, and they had to pull the wires out. This was a long time ago. I want to point this out. And as they went around this corner in front of them, right across the road, was a luminous bank of mist or fog or gas, was the three different words that they used to describe it. So it was luminous and it was green. So in other words, the light within it was actually, making it look green. And they could do nothing else but plow into this green luminous fog. And inside it, it was like everything stopped. They felt very nauseous. They felt as if time had stood still. And then the next thing they know, they are about 3/4 of a mile, about a kilometre further on from where they were when they went into this mist. The only concern was, is everybody okay, sort of thing. And the interesting thing is that the son that had got excited about the UFO, he was awake, still in the same position, but the other two children who had been asleep were in exactly the same positions and still asleep in the back of the car. Just bear that in mind for what I'm about to come on to, because when they get home, they find that 3 hours are missing from their life. And they sit on this for about 3 years, just trying to forget the whole thing. But both the man and the wife start to have these strange dreams of being in like this sort of surgical lit room, these beings working on them, which they described as almost like, elves or fairies or gnomes or something, because that's the only thing that they could equate with it, what was going on. And eventually they reached out and I met them, and I arranged for hypnosis for the gentleman. His name was John Day. He's still alive. I'm still in touch with him now. And a so-called onboard experience was revealed. They were taken on board some craft, shown things, medical exam, usual sort of stuff. That the wife, her experience was quite similar, although she started recalling it even without hypnosis eventually. And I became firm friends with this couple, John and Sue Day. And I would spend a lot of time around their house. I would stay there nights, and paranormal phenomena would start taking place, which perplexed me because I didn't understand what the relationship was between the paranormal and UFOs at that time. And we realized that we're almost getting out of our depth and we needed a parapsychologist. And what was so strange is that the wife, Sue, had a strange dream that a parapsychologist, came to us, and that his initials were GP. And she thought that this must mean that he's a general practitioner, in other words, a medical doctor. But 2 weeks later, a parapsychologist did turn up on our doorstep, and he did have the initials GP, and it was a guy called Graham Phillips, who's become one of my closest friends. He also writes some incredible books and is on the scene to this day. His latest book came out last year on Stonehenge. And, together we started to try and work out what was going on. And we realized that there were certain elements that were important to these experiences. Firstly, there was something about the genetic background of the individuals that this allowed them to display psychic abilities, everything from psychometry, the being able to hold an object and feel something about it, to the feeling of presences, to astral projection, the seeing of ghosts, the sort of experiences that people have throughout their life. And the same type of people were also the people that were having the close encounters. And we thought, well, why is this? Are they attracting these intelligences to them? Is there something special about them? We wrote about this in a magazine that Graham Phillips and I created called Strange Phenomena, copies of which are still out there somewhere. And the other thing that I started to realize is that these experiences were not happening in normal space time. What I mean by that is that once people started interacting with these plasma environments, whether they were these glowing mists or, oval or round objects or constructs of the sort that we would regularly call UFOs, is that they were being taken out of normal space time. And the way I realized this was because of the Day family case, which took place at a place called Averley in Essex, and not far from where I sit at this very moment. And think about what was going on. When they went into that mist, there were 5 of them in the car. One of the children was awake. He had his hands on the passenger and the driver's seat. The other 2 children were asleep. And when they came out of it, seemingly 3 hours later, which I have no problem about believing their story, is that everybody was still in the same position. It was as if what had just happened across 3 hours of our time had actually taken place in no time. So clearly they'd gone somewhere else to experience this. And I started referring to this environment that they would go into as a bubble universe. In other words, it was almost like a universe like we live in, but one that opens up temporarily, where they interact with something that's outside of normal space-time, something that's a multi-dimensional environment. And what's happening is that their brains are interacting with the intelligences associated with these plasma environments to almost create like a dream reality, one that possibly is shifting and changing depending on what's going on in their brain, how they react and relate and commune with the intelligences. In other words, their experience is based on their preconceptions, their beliefs, what the intelligences themselves want us to see and experience. And then eventually, obviously, something happens. Perhaps they can only be kept in this environment for a certain period of time before, they start disappearing completely. And they have to be put back in our reality. And this is when a person is returned to this world after the so-called missing time experience. And I think that this is a perfect example. I've used it in various of my books, including Light Quest, the last book, as a perfect example of what's going on. And I then give many other examples where similar things take place, where it's quite clear these, let's call them what they are, abduction experiences are taking place outside of normal space-time. And that during the time that they're missing, they're just simply not around, basically. I mean, they're not here. They're not in this world. And I mean, a skeptic relating to that case would say, oh, the family, obviously experienced something, maybe high electromagnetic anomalies, and it made them go to sleep. And they parked at the side of the road for 3 hours and then woke up and drove home. Well, that's ridiculous, because I know the road that they were on, and there is no way that people could stay there for 3 hours without somebody stopping and saying, "Are you okay?" There's just no way that it would happen. So, they genuinely left our physical space-time for that 3 hours. So where did they go? They went into a multi-dimensional environment, and this is this invisible universe. But, don't see this universe as just like one big world that exists beyond. It isn't. It's like bubbles that open up and close all the time, and you could go anywhere. I mean, I think that you can go into parallel realities, parallel worlds, and that when we have, strange phenomena at portal locations like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, for instance, or Bempton in the UK, is that what's happening is that you've got physical creatures and beings that are actually coming through from another parallel world or reality that are synchronizing somehow with this multi-dimensional environment enough for the crossover to take place.
Right.
But even they can only exist here for a very limited time, maybe a few minutes, few hours, maybe even just a few weeks in some cases, but somehow everything has to shift back and they go back from whence they came. And that this is the explanation for things like cryptids such as, dire wolves or huge cats or dog-headed bipeds, which we call lycons. And, these things, they're real, but they're not, and if you went up to them, I think that some of them would actually cast a shadow. In other words, they truly are present in our reality, but it's only for a very temporary period before they have to go back from whence they come.
That's interesting because a few weeks ago, I was driving out in the country where I live, and I saw an animal running from left to right as I was driving, and right to left. And I looked closely, and it was a dog that was the biggest dog I've ever seen. It was black, and it was doing about 40 to 50 miles an hour, fastest animal I've ever seen in my life. And it was just gigantic. And I was doing 20 feet per stride, seriously, covering 20 feet per stride. And it was going so fast that I watched it, and there was no hills or trees or anything to the area where it went, and I could not find it. It was gone. It just disappeared. And I told a bunch of people, I think I saw a dire wolf or something, right? And everybody's like, well, I don't know, Jay, there's no wolves around here. And there aren't, because they would hear them at night. So I don't know what it was, but I definitely saw something, and it disappeared. It was too big to disappear. So these things do happen. And you're right, these bubbles open up and close. And this is also why bullets don't seem to work. People have shot these creatures with their guns. Hunters have experienced out in the woods, suddenly see what they call a dog man, and they'll shoot at it and they'll hit it. But there's no blood and there's no wound and there's no death, and it just seems to disappear over and over. You hear the same stories. Oh, it was there and then it wasn't, right? And these stories like the fairy tale myths, where a person will encounter elves or gnomes out in the woods, and they start dancing and they drink the mead or whatever, and and then 20 years later they wake up, right? And these stories are probably based on reality, I would think. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as Jacques Vallée pointed out in his classic book of the 1970s, Passport to Magonia, that there are clear overlaps between what we call the UFO phenomena of today and the fairy encounters and the fairy abductions of the past. And the more you look into that, the more actually that's true. I mean, I've found fairy encounters that involve objects coming down, beings coming out of the objects, and then going onto the ground and dancing and drawing, beguiling people into that dance environment. And then those beings will like become a ball of light, return into the larger ball and disappear. Now, if that happened today, we'd see this in terms of the greys or light beings from from an extraterrestrial source or an interdimensional source or whatever. But it was going on in the past, and I think we have to assume that it's been going on forever. But here's the important thing: with each different generation, what we see slightly changes. Obviously, since the the inception of the flying saucer, pop culture world of 1947 onwards, we're seeing things in terms of extraterrestrials as, guys in space suits, weird little grey creatures, and a lot of this is based on pop culture. It's based on fiction. It's based on what's going into us, what we believe about if we encountered something from another world, what would it look like? And we have all got a picture in our head. It might be right, it might be wrong. And that is likely to influence what we see. If we have an abduction experience or a close encounter with this phenomena, and the way that the phenomena interacts with us is going to mold what we see and what we experience. I mean, for instance, obviously during the 50s and 60s, the main entities that were seen coming out of flying saucers were, you know, tall Nordic looking people, you know, Venusians, Martians, you know, people like this. That doesn't happen anymore, very, very rarely. I mean, very clearly in the post Whitley Strieber Communion days, and that book came out in 1987, obviously that image of the grey became the image of the extraterrestrial, you know, or it overrode virtually everything else that had ever existed up to that time. And I mean, I know one abductee who even changed the drawings of his own entities that he saw from something with small beady eyes and a bigger head to a much more obvious grey with almond-shaped eyes, and said, look, this is what I saw. You know, this I'm sure was conscious, because he didn't want to feel as if he was seeing something that was out of date. And that says an awful lot, that what we expect as the greys is become the norm for any kind of encounter with what we perceive as extraterrestrials. And in my opinion, I don't think that a lot of what we're seeing is extraterrestrial at all. It's multidimensional. I mean, I'm not saying that there is no extraterrestrial contact, but what I'm saying is that the first port of call, quite literally, the portals, what we are seeing is something of a multi-dimensional nature.
Which is really much more interesting than aliens, I think. Yeah, so you're right. We're painting what we see with our cultural ideologies. So the children at Fatima saw the Blessed Virgin. But the people who witnessed the events at Fatima report more of a plasma experience. And so what was once religious is now that religions are going away, and they are. We're replacing it with a cultural identity of aliens from Star Trek and Star Wars and all the science fiction movies, and Whitley Strieber. Interestingly enough, Whitley Strieber's wife, who's now deceased, and she was a wonderful person, she told me once that she couldn't sleep one night, and in their cabin in upstate New York, which is probably in one of these zones, by the way, that Whitley was in bed all night, and then she knows he was in bed all night because she was in the living room, and that he woke up and he said he had been abducted that night. And he gave vivid details of the abduction experience and everything, but he hadn't left his bed. And, you know, that really, you know, that got me when she told me that. I was like, what does that mean? Right. And now I'm believing that he's in one of these window areas. And when the window opens, he's having this experience. Even when he's asleep, he's having a plasma brain to plasma environment experience. And he's going through the classic abduction of the medical thing and all the rest. Do you think that these plasma beings are interested in us medically?
It's a difficult one. I mean, people should read Graham Hancock's book, Supernatural. I mean, he covers this in great detail, shows its validity, and, you know, puts a very convincing case that people truly are undergoing very serious medical things. You know, babies are being removed from people's, you know, chests, and, you know, there are all sorts of stuff like this going on, that it is a reality. I think this is important. I mean, if you read some books, you might think, well, this is a great read, but I don't really believe it. But Graham Hancock became firmly convinced that a lot of this was real. So, yeah, it is possible that when we're in these environments, I mean, okay, here's the thing, right? I mean, we're talking about these bubble environments, these bubble universes that seem to open up, but I think they're only temporary, and I think that they are constructed by the intelligences for the direct interaction between us and them. And I don't think they're the ones that are actually, you know, extracting babies or doing anything like this. What I think happens is that sometimes these portals open that allow access to somewhere else. And that somewhere else is another world, another reality, where there are entities that seriously are interested in, you know, human reproduction, babies, that type of abduction. In other words, we could be interacting with another race of beings that is on a parallel world or a parallel existence. And that is a very strong possibility. I mean, that I give you as a theory. I mean, we don't know for certain. Right. And obviously we can't talk about individual cases because, you know, this is a much wider phenomena. I mean, you know, any individual case could be true or it might be false. It could be fantasy, could be real. So we don't know, you know, and so, but generally, I don't think we should dismiss this. But I think that, I mean, these fairy abductions have been there, as we said, for you know, for many hundreds and therefore thousands of years. So similar things have been going on. I mean, like before the fairies, I mean, bear in mind that most fairy encounters, certainly in, let's say, Britain, are the product of Shakespearean interest in fairies and elves and things like that.
Good point.
You know, the whole thing of Puck and Midsummer Night's Dream. I mean, that changed people's perspective in, you know, completely about the reality of fairies and elves. I mean, up until that time, I'm not saying they didn't exist, but they were far more associated with rural communities and folk magic and stuff like that. Right. But after Shakespeare wrote about it, it became an incredibly popular subject. And I think that the abduction experience changed dramatically at that time. Prior to this time, in medieval period, those same abductions were mostly associated with demons and devils.
They were.
And those demons and devils had various localized names, some of which would later be adopted by these fairies and elves, like Puck, for instance, Buka or Buka, which were the old terms for a devil, or Poke was another name of them. And these names were also associated with the appearance of mysterious lights.
Wow.
That's the interesting factor here.
Yeah.
Pokey, Spunky was another one. Some of them were seen as male, some of them were seen as female. Like there was one of the names that was used is Jenny Greenteeth. Jenny was quite a common name associated with the appearance of lights. But these are not just the appearance of lights, they are the appearance of entities associated with the lights. I mean, there's one place which I may end up talking about in the next book, which is this waterfall in the county of Yorkshire, where mysterious lights are seen. And it's said that the waterfall is haunted by this Queen of the Fairies. Her name is Jenny or Janet. And, you know, that various people have been there and had very strange encounters with a woman in the water there after seeing the lights, as if the lights themselves have caused the people to have this. And one of the cases is very interesting. There was a guy and a woman. They went to the fall and they saw this light, you know, coming out of it that was like mesmerizing, beguiling, drawing them to it. But the woman actually walked and into the water, and she could see this beautiful female figure who was like drawing her close. But her husband realized that something not good was taking place, or in his mind. So he grabbed her hand, pulled her out of the water. And as she came out of the water, this beautiful woman changed to this old hag. And this is very classical from folklore of Britain. Yeah. You know, the woman of the forest, the queen of the forest, who has this ability to change from a hag to a beautiful maiden that could beguile, generally men, obviously, into, you know, marrying them and that without realizing what they are. But here's the interesting thing. I mean, this is the light manifesting as this woman. And this is, although this is happening in the modern day, I suspect that this is similar to what might have been happening at the same spot in medieval times, or perhaps even earlier than that. That if you think in terms of the 12th, 13th century knights, grail romances, stories of supernatural, mystical stuff like that. This is what I would expect to connect with that period, not the modern day. And yet here it is, still manifesting the same way in the 21st century. I find that quite intriguing, and it gives you the range. Plus, there are other accounts, you've already alluded to them, where people encounter these plasma constructs or plasma balls that then change into Jesus Christ.
Yep.
And, Jesus will reach out his hand and say, come with me. And the next thing they know, they're flying over paradise. Yep. With, in the company of Jesus. So what the hell's going on? Clearly, they're being drawn into this multidimensional reality, which is being made up in front of them based on what they think should be happening under such circumstances. Now, therefore, you have to be careful what you wish for or what you think.
Yes.
If you want this to be a pleasant experience, make sure that's what you're thinking. If you want this to be a nightmare, it can be a nightmare.
Well, you're reminding me, my good friend, David Paulides, he's an ex-police officer. He's written several books called Missing 411, which entails the details of all these people that go missing frequently in our national parks. And they just completely disappear off the face of the earth. There's no trace of any animals getting them. The bloodhounds can't find them. They just disappear. Or even weirder, they will disappear and then reappear like 20 miles away. I'm talking like 3-year-old boys. Will literally, the police will tell us that they think the little boy walked 20 miles through dense forest in the middle of the winter, right, with no shoes. And also, this would also explain, by the way, why many of the people that he writes about don't have shoes, because they're going into a plasma field and the shoes will short out. So the first thing that happens is the shoes will burn off or go away because of the plasma field. And also the other thing that he points out is that if you're in a place that has a name associated with the devil, like the Devil's Ridge or the Devil's Canyon, that is almost always a place where these events take place. So the people who first arrived here, the Native Americans, also warned like the pioneers to not go to West Virginia. They said, don't go there. That place is haunted. And that's where the mound people, the people that built their mounds, it's also where like Charlie Manson is from. And a lot of other strange people are from that area. The Mothman sightings in the 60s were in that area. And so definitely, if you're in a place that has the devil in the title, you might want to, take a look around and make sure you have somebody with you, because a lot of people disappear in these areas. And I think this may be the explanation. Paulides is careful enough not to go in to an explanation for what is happening. He's just giving us the details of the cases. But this surely has got to be taken as one of the things that may be going on here.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you talked about locations having interesting place names. Well, unquestionably, many of them are associated with supernatural events that have been put down to entities and beings there, whether they be devils, demons, fairies, elves. Obviously, in Arab countries, those sort of locations are connected with the jinn, for instance. And obviously, Native Americans have clearly got their own terms for these type of beings. But I think even though these sites are, you are more susceptible to experiencing these things, we should not take away the human element here, the human consciousness interaction, because obviously, if you go to a place that has got a reputation, or you even think that it's got a reputation to do with devils or demons or something like that, that is going to immediately create a certain state of mind that is going to make your interaction with the phenomena much easier to take place. I think that's important. But it doesn't just relate to places with interesting place names, but obviously sites that have already been associated with portal phenomena. We've obviously talked about Skinwalker Ranch, as I say, there's a place called Bempton in Yorkshire in the UK. But another place that has similar phenomena is Avebury in southern England. This is an area that has got megalithic, Neolithic, and Bronze Age monuments going back obviously 5,000-6,000 years. And this area has been producing strange light phenomena for at least 400 years, and therefore arguably, you know, for thousands of years. And I strongly suspect that the people that created Avebury and the beautiful stone circles that are there knew exactly what they were doing, and they knew about the lights, and they related to them in some manner.
Right.
But I think what's important is that in recent years, this same area has also become a hotbed of crop circles. Over the last 20, 30 years, this is where the big crop circles appear. So people come from all over Britain, all over Europe, and obviously from the States and elsewhere to try and experience something in the area around Avebury and nearby Alton Barnes. And many of them do. And you know, they've had incredible experiences, you know, encounters with these light beings, seeing these plasma constructs, time steps, and it's not simply people that come into the area, but also locals as well, also have incredible experiences. So it's not something that purely associated with people that believe. But I think what's important, though, is the feeling. I mean, I've been to these places many times, and when I enter the area of Avebury or Alton Barnes, I feel I can experience something. I feel I can see a light. I feel that something can happen at any time. I don't feel that if I go down the road here and walk up to the local shop. I don't feel that way. So is the importance. Human consciousness plays an incredible, crucial role. I say that the phenomena associated with a portal location, at least 50% of it is the product of human interaction with that locality. And it somehow stirs things up, and the relationship between you and the phenomena and the intelligences becomes stronger and stronger. And so we, you know, in other words, if you took us out of the picture, you took all humans away from that locality, plus you took away the humans that have built the stone circles or whatever else it is, the medicine wheels, you take them out of the way, what would be going on at that location if we weren't around? And the answer is very little, in my opinion. And I think things would be going on, maybe lights would appear, whatever, but it would be much more infrequent, and it would be much less strange in its appearance.
I agree. I think they're these phenomena, they're somewhat attracted to us. They seem to like human beings, and they actually seem to like dare I say, love. People that are in love seem to attract them, and people who are angry seem to attract the nastier ones. So it is based on how you think. I really agree with that. And if you go into it terrified, then you're probably going to have a terrified experience. If you go into a positive experience, you're going to have a positive entities. And I think that is a really seriously great point. Yeah. So, I mean, where do we go next with this? Where do you think the next level of research
Well,
should be?
I mean, the problem that we have here is that what we're talking about here could potentially be examined by science and work
Right.
with science. But, you know, you could do two things. You can get scientific monitoring of a portal location 24/7 over a long period of time, and you look for patterns in multiple frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum, plus also sound medium, which is something which I think is probably as important, possibly even more important, to record anomalies and possible interactions between us and the intelligence of the phenomena. So you can do that. And what you'll be looking for is patterns. You're looking for patterns of activity. But beyond that, the human interaction part of it is crucial. In other words, you bring in a team that involves not just indigenous peoples. If you're in America, members of local tribes that will help with rituals, ceremonies, spiritual advice, and guidance and stuff like this. But also work with the best psychics and remote viewers in the world. And the reason I stress that is because there's a lot of people out there who are psychic, genuinely, but they're not that good, in all honesty. I mean, their success rate, their percentage rate is not very high. I mean, I work with psychics and have done for the last 30, 40 years, and they can be as much as 90% accurate in their information. And what I mean by that is, if we concentrate on a particular location, they can pick up names, dates, places with an accuracy that can be as high as 90%. Right. It can't be any higher than that, because human, failings come in and it causes us to get things wrong, basically, interpretation of information, whatever. But up to 90%, those are the people that I would bring in to a portal location to work with not just the indigenous peoples, because obviously they've got their ideas of the local spirit intelligences, the ancestors of the place, the so-called genius loci, the spirit of the place. But I would do regular communications through meditations to try and connect with the phenomena and basically start a dialogue. I mean, this is something we have done in many places, certainly in Britain and places in the States. You start a dialogue, you try and connect with the phenomena. You say, look, we're open here to communication. Do you want us to do anything? Are we at the right place? Should we come back at a particular time? And that dialogue gets stronger and stronger. And eventually it will unquestionably result in weird stuff happening. And if at the same time you have scientific monitoring going on, then that's your goal, to try and show the whole relationship between all of it. That's what we should be doing. But beyond that, as I mentioned in our first chat last week, it's about trying to understand the language between us and the intelligence of the phenomena. And that language is not going to be a language of our creation, English, German, or, Navajo or anything like this. It may form part of it, but it's much more likely to be mathematical in nature, something that is beyond human creation of its own, something that's beyond even the perceptions of our terrestrial world. I mean, we perceive the sun and the moon through certain cycles, and certain numbers crop up because of that: 7, 9, 108, to etc., etc. But these are of our creation, so you're not going to get that. You're looking for things that are purely universal in mathematics. And one of the keys to it is something called Pascal's triangle. Pascal's triangle is a mathematical construct that looks like a triangle with a whole load of numbers in, that has different mathematical formulas encoded within it, including the blueprint of higher dimensional geometry and reality. I mean, that's a fact. This is not some new age idea. Look it up. Right. I've written about it myself here and there. And so, this something like Pascal's triangle, the numbers, the connections with that should be looked for. And I found this pattern, myself in certain communications. But that's just one example. There are many other universal mathematical principles which I think we should be looking for, and that gives us a common language to move forward with.
So, do you think channeling is these people are talking to these plasma entities when they're channeling?
Some, and see, the trouble is, it's not a case of whether they are or they're not. It's a case of the percentage factor of their accuracy.
Right.
In other words, if
Good
they're
point.
not accurate, then they can be leading you astray and nothing is really going to happen.
Right.
But sometimes people are accurate at specific moments and perhaps not, for the rest of the week or something. It's about coordinating things and getting to a state where the belief in what's going on is, it creates this union amongst the group, and that's what you're looking for.
Right.
You're not specifically looking for, I won't say, dead accuracy all the time, although that helps. It really does help because, if you could be picking up, for instance, on the ancestors of a place, and you're picking up correct names of past shamans of a location, and they check out and they're real and they're now talking to you, you're going to believe that. You're going to buy into what's going on, and that makes it much easier for the phenomena to react to your human consciousness present. This interaction with our own minds. Whereas if you're hearing a load of new age stuff and you're not really relating to it, that's not going to help matters.
Right.
See, and channeling is channeling. I mean, you take it in whatever way you want. I mean, it can be beautiful. It can be factual. It can be spiritual. That's fine. But is it going to help you specifically to interact with this phenomena? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. That's why, from my own point of view, when I do these projects, and I've done various ones, I did 3 years running in the area around Avebury back in the 90s, the so-called orgone projects, which are written up in my books like Alien Energy. We only worked with absolute accurate psychics, people that we knew and trusted and didn't really have a bias. They were just picking up on whatever was going on at the place, relaying it, and it would check out. So you would buy into what was going on, and phenomena did indeed occur.
No, I know you're right. I've been recently associated with a Canadian psychic, Patricia Mona. She finds the missing people for the police, and incredibly accurate. And she's been helping me with a local case here where a woman just disappeared off the face of the earth. And so far, she's been incredibly accurate. And I think you're right. We're going to go to Egypt with her in 1 year, hopefully, if they lift the travel thing.
Yeah.
And we're going to go to the Great Pyramid, and I want to hear what she has to say, because of her psychic abilities. And I think that's what psychic ability is. It's the ability to tap into this kind of ever-present plasma field in which time doesn't really have any meaning. That's the other thing I know about your story about the family and the car, but that means that the car disappeared too,
Yeah.
This is like, you got to wrap your head around the whole thing. And it's just amazing because one time on his in his lab on Long Island, Tesla accidentally touched a piece of metal that had 3 million volts running through it. And if it hadn't been for his quick assistant who turned everything off, he would have died. But he was, magnetically attached to the thing until his assistant pulled the switch. And later that night, he was at a restaurant, and one of his friends who was a journalist came by his table and said, "Hey, man, you look like you're really shook up. What's going on?" And he said, "Well, I got shocked by 3 million volts today for a split second." And he said, "Oh, what was that like?" Right? And he said, "It was weird because I saw the past, the future, and the present. In that split second, I saw the entire past, the entire future, and the entire present all at the same time." And so what I think, my theory now, don't hold me to it, I think that electricity, plasma, is the essence of this higher dimension, and that high concentrations of it cause the interactions to be more and more active and complex. And I think, and you also have to remember that, like, like psychedelic drugs like dimethyltryptamine are actually crystals. And if you have a tray of dimethyltryptamine, you hit it with a hammer, sparks fly out. So there's, which means that these crystals are holding electricity in them. And so, and we know that dimethyltryptamine is only one atom away from serotonin, which is a natural brain chemistry, which is activated by light. And I think that serotonin is maybe the plasma activator of human beings, and that it activates the pineal gland, which has a crystal in it, which attunes us to these electromagnetic phenomena. And that you're right, if you do meditation and you treat your body right and everything, you're going to have more of these interactions. You know, I have people say to me, how come I never see anything? You know, you guys always see stuff and I never see anything. And I think, number one, you have to be looking. That's the one thing. So you've got to be aware of your surroundings, or you will miss it. And two, you have to attune yourself to these things. You have to consciously say, I'm going to see these. I can't tell you how many people have told me that that they've asked to see, you know, the things, and they appear. And that's just, it happens a lot. People have the ability to make these things appear in front of them, and it's a belief system, and it's an understanding. That's why the subject is so important, because if you understand that this is actually a physical phenomenon, it's not some fantasy or imaginary thing, it's physical, it's a real phenomena, then you can accept it, and then you can start interacting with it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a state of mind that you've got to achieve yourself. But even then, I mean, look, I believe, and I'm telling you all this, but I mean, I've only ever had, you know, I can count on one hand the amount of genuine lights I've seen, and even, you know, 2 or 3 of those I'm not sure what I saw.
Right.
But you know, in other words, you can't, you know, just because you believe, you cannot make you know, you can't just have an experience. But I think what's important is that it's not just about seeing a light. You know, to me, there are so many other things that you can experience strange from us. You know, weird sounds that you can record or hear, weird experiences, time slips. You know, other types of experience, which are all part of the same thing. You know, lights is only just one. They're what I'd call the icing on the cake,
Right.
as far as seeing them. But other things are going on all the time. And if you're aware of that and you can record them in some manner, that's almost as good as seeing the lights, I think. So, you know, it shouldn't be narrowed down to whether I do or don't see a light. That you know, in other words, there's lots of other things going on.
That's right.
That you can either experience or record. You know, I mean, for me, for instance, every time I go to a portal location, I will be recording on you know, a sound recording equipment all the time, because I'm looking for activity that's going on that we can't hear.
Right.
That's, you know, below the audible range of the human ear. And just occasionally you'll get bursts of activity which are completely anomalous, and often they will coincide with whatever you're doing. So if you're doing a meditation or a ritual to call these things down, it will happen exactly when you call them down. It's as if the phenomena is just turning around saying, who's down there? And, you know, they're like responding in some way. And that to me feels as good as seeing a light. I mean, clearly I'd love to do that. And I think that hanging out at portal locations is probably the best thing to do. And, you know, if I had to go tomorrow, I mean, other than the obvious places like Skidwalker Ranch, I would go to somewhere like Mount Adams in Washington State. You know, I mean, go to the Gilliland Ranch there, where you know, you can spend time, you can stay there for days, and you know, all sorts of people have gone there and seen lights coming off of the mountain at Mount Adams. And as we talked about in our previous chat last week, we know that this is a genuine place where that phenomena can take place. It was where the first ever UFO sighting occurred in modern era, which was 1947. Kenneth Arnold saw his 9 objects going over Mount Rainier. And, you know, the phenomena's still there today. You know, that's where I would go. I mean, I've never been there, but hopefully one day I will go.
Yeah, there's a guy from Britain named Nick Hayes, and he's developed a full spectrum camera and uses infrared. He has a book out and also a website. And I'm going to have him on the show, I think. And he actually photographs these things, these objects. They're sometimes they look like fish, sometimes they look like insects, sometimes they look humanoid, and they're in the sky above him. And he can't see them when he's just shooting, clicking away, and then he goes and looks, and then he sees them. And the same thing here locally. There's a guy who takes his iPhone, puts it on 120 frames a second, points it at the sky and hits record and just shoots the sky for like 5 minutes, and then goes and looks at it at normal speed, and you'll see these little balls rolling across the screen and dancing with each other, but you can't see them with your eye. So we're a group of us all around the world are developing these full spectrum cameras, and we're going to try and actually photograph these things, whatever they are. And I'll get back to you on that because it's very exciting research. And Nick Hayes is someone you should talk to.
Certainly. But the one thing I would say though is, you know, having done these so-called orgone projects, you know, monitoring the local energy levels, using different types of cameras, including infrared, is the one big problem is trying to prove that what you get is some kind of anomalous object, that it's not something close to the lens, you know, or something more mundane. And here's the most important thing: stereo. If you can record it in stereo, that will tell you so much more information about what you are seeing.
Really good point.
Because it shows its objectivity, and you can also measure how far away it is from the camera. So that's something for the future.
That is a really good suggestion. I'm going to look into that. I think that's a really good suggestion. Thank you for that. Well, listen, Andrew, it has been absolutely wonderful having you talk about this subject that nobody really talks about. And hopefully it'll give some push to your great book, Light Quest, because you've written so many important books that I can't really say, you know, it's the most important book you've written, but I think it is one of the most important books you've ever written. And it changed my life. I mean, I completely rethought everything after I read your book. I was just like, wait a minute here. Everything I'm thinking about is completely wrong. And then it also validated my own personal experiences, of which I was befuddled by because I couldn't understand what it was that I had seen. And now I understand what I'm looking at and what I've seen in my own experiences. So I really, really appreciate you coming on Reality Check. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much. And hopefully I will update Light Quest sometime and also get it to a wider audience as well.
Well, yeah, I think that's a really good point because it's a valuable book. That with coupled with Earth Lights by Paul Devereaux really gives you a full understanding of what
which I think is an important point. I mean, because I'm sure some of the viewers will be saying, well, you know, if I want to read about this, you know, where do I go? And obviously, other than recommending my own books, Light Quest being, you know, on the top of the list, Paul Devereaux's books, Earth Lights and Earth Lights Revelation. They're two different books, both of which are really, really, really important. Obviously, beyond that, you've got the works of John Keel, you know, that realizes the whole bizarre nature of the phenomena. I mean, they seriously influenced me when I was young.
Same
Jacques Vallée, of course, his books like Passport to Begonia is essential. But beyond that, the book that I think changed everything was, it came out in 1977 by a guy called Michael Persinger, who was a Canadian neuroscientist, I seem to recall. And he wrote a book called Space-Time Transience. This was the book that changed everything for everybody because he realized that this phenomena was on so many different levels. It connected with the cryptids, it connected with earthquakes. It connected with geology. The lights manifesting, and that influenced people like Paul Devereaux, and various other people in this field. So, but it's now a very expensive book to
Very
get. But it's called
expensive.
Space Time Transients by Michael Persinger.
And
And beyond that, the other books that are worth reading, you already mentioned one, Jenny Randall's Time Storms.
yeah.
That is an incredible book.
I
Very, very important work.
I think if anybody out there publishes books, I think you should republish the Persinger book, because it's, I think, $300 on Amazon right now, and we really need to get that book into a low print form. So somebody please get that book. It is really truly one of the most important books ever written.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that it's so expensive, because regular folks aren't going to be able to read it. So anyway, great suggestions. Also, Dimensions by Jacques Vallée is also another really good book. But you're right, anything by John Keel as a, also, I think there's a book, can't remember. Anyway, those are all good books. I highly recommend them. Andrew, thank you very much for coming on Reality Check. You're a great guy. I love you. If you ever come back to the United States, if we ever have a conference again, I don't even know if conferences are coming back. I look forward to seeing you.
Well, I'm in San Mateo Center in October for the New Living Expo, which is a huge exhibition with multiple lectures and whatever, providing that the situation in our world allows it to go ahead, and that's in October. But if anybody's interested in the details of where I am, what I'm doing in the future, my books, have a look at andrewcollins.com, my website, andrewcollins.com. Everything's on there.
Great. Well, I may head out to San Mateo just because I just want to see people. Been locked up so long. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks.
Okay. All the best. See you, Jay.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for watching Reality Check. Hit subscribe, like, and share, and help me out. And I really appreciate everybody watching. I'm Jay Weidner, and thank you.